Hi everyone. So this week we're going to be discussing Chapter 8, and that involved problem solving and decision making skills. And then we're going to apply the concepts from Chapter 8 to the Hockaday case. So the first question asks us, using concepts from this week's chapter, describe the primary problems to be solved in the Hockaday case. So some of the problems that I noticed in the Hockaday case is you're dealing with a multicultural group. There's a lot of demographic change and a lot of organizational uncertainty, interpersonal dynamics, and ethical dimensions. And so, in order to ensure that the team's able to operate at its highest efficiency, they need to be aware of these barriers to communication and do what they can to kind of overcome these issues. And some of the things that they could do to help with that is to spend more time in a face-to-face communication, and to also be sure to use media-rich channels when they're discussing problems or making decisions, rather than using some of the media-lean channels. The next question is to describe the choices Jill has for problem solving and decision making processes. So Jill's choices for problem solving and decision making, one of the things that Jill should consider is the culture. So Hockaday kind of has a unique culture in the fact that most of the teams are self-directed leadership teams. So one of the things that seems to come out in the case is that there isn't a lot of upward and downward communication between top management and the self-directed teams. And so one thing she might want to consider, although it's great to give people the ability to make their own choices, they need enough information in order to make the best choices. And so more downward communication could definitely help Jill in this case. Some of the other things is there's a lot of communication competencies that may be causing some of the issues. And some of the things that they could do to help alleviate that is having more face-to-face interaction, spending some time doing some team building exercises, and just working on overall group cohesiveness, because it doesn't seem like the virtual team is very cohesive. It states in the text that complex problems require a higher level of participation. So by including that interpersonal focus and focusing on the interpersonal skills that the members need to be successful, I think the team can create better relationships with one another and therefore increase their ability to be more effective at problem solving and decision making. So the next question, moving on to number 3, is which problem solving processes discussed in Chapter 8 should Jill consider? Why? And should she combine more than one approach? So some of the problem solving processes that Jill should consider would be creating a stable leadership position. So far, the group has been a rotating leadership position, and I think that if they had a stable leadership position, they might find that groove that they need to find, because there would be somebody responsible for directing information, and it wouldn't be consistently changing all the time like it is with a rotating leadership. Another thing that she should consider about that is it also helps with the role ambiguity. So a lot of the members on the team have certain specialties that they tend to focus on. That kind of came out in the first event when they all wanted to break off into separate groups and handle things. And while having specified roles is good, in order to get the most creativity from the group, they need to be able to work as a group, not as several different groups. And so one way they could do that is to have that stable leadership, have a leader that can kind of pose questions and cause the group to consider and think about different solutions to different problems. Another thing that would also help is, of course, the more face-to-face interaction. I've mentioned that several times throughout our semester, and about how if the group met regularly face-to-face, they might have a little bit more interpersonal, relational ability to one another. And then lastly, they need to limit the media lean technology. Because the group is a virtual group, they're reliant on technology, so you can't eliminate it, but what they need to do is try to focus on the more media-rich kind of communication, such as teleconferencing and video conferencing, where they have the ability to see one another and actually have that simulated face-to-face interaction. I think that would help the group a lot. Another one they could consider is the standard agenda, which is a reflective thinking process that most people use in an individual decision-making ability. But in a group ability, what they could consider doing is having that individual reflective thinking process and just kind of writing a bunch of ideas and then coming together in like a video conference session and discussing the different ideas with a focus on nobody making any judgments about the ideas that are thrown out there. Everything's game. So using that and then using a brainstorm session to discuss the ideas might help the group to foster a little more creativity when it comes to problem solving, and it also might help them to be quicker to solve the problem. If you remember, the first event took them quite an amount of time for them to solve, and so I think that if they instituted the standard agenda and the brainstorming session following, they might see better results with the effectiveness of their problem-solving ability. The next question, which is number 4, is according to the text, what are the skills needed for problem-solving and decision-making at Hockaday responders? So I think the biggest one, and the one that stands out the most to me, is the interpersonal. There's no group cohesion. And so in order to create that, they need to spend time as a group outside of their normal responsibilities. So creating a meeting where they all meet in the same location once or twice a year might have a really good effect on their interpersonal communication skills. Another thing that the group needs to consider is realizing about banded rationality. So you can only get so many good decisions because after a while there's just too much information, especially in this day and age. So accepting that they're not going to be able to come up with all of the information and making the most satisfying decision available to the group sometimes is the best thing that they could do. Another thing is the interaction process skills. And I think, once again, that would be fulfilled by the group meeting face-to-face and spending some time in some team bonding activities, doing something fun outside of their normal work. And another thing that they could consider, now I know they say that personality assessments aren't 100% accurate, but I've found that when I understand that somebody operates in a different way than I do, for example, they're an introvert and I'm an extrovert, I'm a little more understanding about why they behave the way they behave. So I think if they all got together as a group and took these assessments and then discussed their results, they might also be able to build on that cohesion in the group. And then lastly, it says, what else from this week's chapter should be considered or could be applied to this case? So other than the personality assessment and discussing ways to work with various types of people, they need to have fun. It seems like at least from what we see in the case, all this group does is work on critical situations. And so when you're always in a high-stress situation, it's important to have that relaxed time. And since they're not all in one location, they don't have that coffee room break or the water cooler conversation. And so spending some time getting to know one another, like maybe they could put out a survey and asking people what their favorite color is, what their favorite animal is, things like that, where they're from, how many brothers and sisters they have. Just knowing a little bit more about somebody as a person can help you be able to better relate to them and to be more understanding when there is conflict. And then lastly, one of the most important things I think for this team is more downward communication. And according to Chapter 8, having that communication would help with fact-finding and evaluation. So if the group is consistently getting the same message by having a standard leader and having that standard leader delivering the message from upper management, the group will be better able to make the decision using the most relevant information. And so I think that those are the other things that could be applied to the case that kind of came from Chapter 8. Well, that's all I got for this week. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you all again next week.